Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be reviewing Disney Animated, a new game from the Prospero Hall design team and publisher Funko Games. In Disney Animated, you are playing an animator in the Disney studios, trying to complete your film, one of the classic films from Disney's slate of them, and you're going to be doing this in a cooperative manner with other players, trying to complete your films before the deadline. Let's head over to the table, I'll kind of let you know how the game works. Come back here and I'll let you know what I think. In Disney Animated, the first thing you're going to do is choose a particular film that you want to be animating. And so you can see the game comes with these 5: Snow White, Fantasia, Alice in Wonderland, 101 Dalmatians, and Aladdin. Once you choose the particular one, let's say you're doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, you're going to have this player board. You're going to have a sideboard that goes along with it. And then within these boxes are all the components that you're going to need for your particular film. Okay, you'll have your tokens that are associated. You'll have which would be in this case the Seven Dwarfs token. These are wooden, screen printed. Okay, let me get those. They're a little bit glary, but you get the idea. You also are going to have your background Tetramino style pieces that you'll see how these work in a moment. You'll have the calamity cards that are specific to your film. You're going to have the 3 animation cells that are going to go in it. I've lost one of my animation cells, but here's 2 of them. Oh, the other one's still in the box. Let me grab that. All right, so you have the 3 animation cells that are going to go over your background, and then you're going to have an associated villain. In this case, it would be the Queen. All right, but there's one of these for every one of the films. Fantasia with its villain, Alice in Wonderland with its villain, right there, 101 Dalmatians with its villain, and finally Aladdin with its villain. All of them are going to have the associated pieces in their story boxes. Okay, here we see more of a complete setup for Disney Animated. Let's assume that we're doing a 2-player game with Aladdin and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That really is only going to come into play in a couple of things. Number one, that Calamity deck right here is only made up of the Calamity cards for the films that are in play. And so let's assume this is a 2-player game. And this Calamity cards number is going to just basically refer to the difficulty for the game. So in a standard 2-player difficulty, you would have 2 calamity cards that you have to deal with. And the last thing that would be associated with which films are in play is that the villains would be specific to the films that are in play. All right? The way you win the game is to have your film completed, and that's going to be a multi-step process. Every player has to have their film completed before the deadline reaches that last spot. Everyone would get one last round, and if they don't have their films completed by that point, then the game is lost. If they do, then the game is won. To finish your film, there's a multi-step part here. You have to get all of your background tiles into your board. You have to have all of your animation cells placed on your board. And you have to have your villain placed on the board. That's how you complete a film. Okay, so let's talk about the game flow a little bit. In the game, each player is going to be taking a particular action that are represented by these action tiles right along here. And there is a player aid card to kind of walk you through that. So the first thing you'll do is select an action tile, then you're going to do the tile's action, or you may instead take a magic token, then you're going to slide the action tiles, and then finally you have the option to place or use characters and remove calamity, and I'll talk about what that means here in a moment. All right, so these are the 5 actions. They were randomly set up here at the beginning of the game, and the number to the right of the tile refers to the strength of that action. So you would pick a particular action to do, you would do it at the corresponding strength. You go like that to show that you have selected it. You do that action, and then you would slide the remaining cards to the right and place this back at the number 1 spot. So it would be the weakest action for the next round. All right. So let's talk a little bit about these actions very briefly to give you an idea of how it works. This sound here is in the number 1 spot for this particular example. Every player is going to have a particular kind of action that is specific to that film, all right? And they're going to usually, or I think almost always, involve their tokens there. And so you would read what it says. It's going to, refer to the strength of the action, and it will oftentimes involve placing your token, all right? But again, these are specific to every film. So for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they've got Seven Dwarfs tokens. It allows you to give a number of them based on the strength of the action and allows that player to do something with those tokens, all right? So every film has their own unique sound action. The animation action is going to be drawing these animation cards. And so depending on the strength, you're either going to draw 1, 2, or 3 animation cards. In this case, you would draw 1 because it's in the strength 2, and it's going to have a particular name, a particular type, or almost a suit of cards you can think of. There are a number of them in the deck. I showed you teamwork. We've got grit and focus and heart, inspiration. Okay, that might be all of them. Yep, okay. And so if you took the animation action, you could take a number of these cards, which are going to be used for a couple of different things I'll talk about in a moment. The background action is how you get these background tiles onto your board. And the strength of that action is going to determine the size of the tile that you could put out here, size or sizes of the tile. So for each square that these background tiles take up, it's going to be 1. So I'd be able to put 3 worth. And on the back of these tiles, it shows you the value of those tiles. So I could place a 2 and a 1. I can place this 3 if I wanted to instead. All right. You'll see that there are icons on the board here. When you cover up one of those icons, you're going to be able to do a particular thing. If you cover up the magic token symbol, you would simply take a magic token and place it in your supply, all right? If you cover up an action spot, you're going to be able to take that action at the strength of the tile it is currently. You don't do it at the strength of the background tile, you do it at the strength of the current action. So let's say that I had a, maybe a 4 instead of a 3 on the background. I was able to cover this. I'd be able to do the ink and paint action at a level 4. All right, but instead maybe I would do something like this. I could place this here. I don't have to place the other one right beneath it like this. I could place one over here, for example, and get a magic token, all right? So I've started to fill up my board. I'd actually get 2 magic tokens for doing that. I could take those, pop them right up there in my token supply, all right? So that's the background. The ink and paint is where you're going to be gathering ink and paint from this section, which was randomly set up at the beginning of the game, all right? And so if you did an ink and paint right now, you'd have 4 buying power, let's just put it that way. The costs are on the associated rows here. So let's say I wanted to get 4 worth of paint. Maybe I would take this one for 1 because wild is nice. And I look at my board here and I see that these are the paints I'm going to be needing to bring these character cells out. So maybe I start working towards those. I know I need purple for 2 of them, so that would be 2, and white and black and red, so 2, and I'm doing this for 4. Let's say I take this, all right? Then all of these paint tokens go above my board, okay? And everything slides down. That can. All right, so that is the ink and paint action. The magic action basically allows you to do the power of any other action at its current power by spending a magic token, okay? I mean, when you take the magic action, pardon me, you pay a magic token and you can do any of the other actions at the strength of the magic tile. So I can do any of these at a strength of 5 by discarding a magic token, okay? Once you have done that, now you've used the action. Let's say that I did the ink and paint like I showed you, all right? I would slide these over. Of course, I also have some background here, but you get the idea. I'm just showing you how it works, okay? You slide those down. Then you can place or use characters and remove calamity, all right? Now, the only way that you can place characters is if the associated area above them is completely filled. So I don't have that in place right now. But let's say, for example, I had done this. I had this set up here, and I had this set up here, okay? Now, this is Aladdin's spot. This is full. If I was able to, if I had a purple and a white, let's say I had these, purple and a wild, that can stand in for a white, I'd put them at the top of one of these columns that has the fewest, but they're all the same there. And then I can place Aladdin's cell onto the associated background. And I would immediately be able to do their power. Choose any player to take any animation cards from the discard pile. There are none now, but let's assume there were some discards here. You can choose from there. In the future, once per turn, at the end of your turn, you could use that character's ability by either spending the associated animation card, in this case inspiration, or a magic token, okay? So that is placing and using characters. Removing Calamity is based on the cards that are over here, okay? And there are going to be 2 in this game's example that are out there every round, all right? So this is one, unfortunately, you can't remove. You've got to deal with it. This one is saying you need to discard a grit card to be able to discard that Calamity card. Well, in this case, let's assume no one had a grit card. We can't remove that one. So what you have to do on the villain's kind of turn is it's right here on their token, okay? It tells you what these do. Advance the deadline, check the hand limit. The hand limit is 7. And then if you have to do a Calamity effect, collectively discard 2 animation cards at random. If they match, then you have to advance the deadline. If you can't do one or both of those, then you advance the deadline again. So let's assume that we advance the deadline at first, no matter what, check hand limit. Can't remove that one, so we would have to collectively discard 2 animation cards at random. If they had matched, we would advance deadline again. If we can't do it, we have to move it up. Can't remove, we don't have a grit card, we have to move it up again, okay? Then once you would do that, you would move that villain to the bottom of the deck, and now you've got a different Calamity effect, where in this case, you would collectively discard a magic token, okay? Which if that had been the one that could come up, I could have just discarded that for one of these and then been okay. All right, so that's the general flow of the game. You're going to select an action tile, do the action, try to get your background, your characters out there. Placing the villain is down here. It says on your turn, if your genie token is above the 5 space, then you can discard red paint, black paint, and these 2 animation cards. And if you were able to do that, you can place Jafar here, and then you'd be done. You'd have, assuming this was all filled, and then you'd have 1 less villain in the villain deck. All right, that's generally how you play. Let's head back over and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, so there you see Disney's Animated, a cooperative game where you are trying to work together to utilize the actions in the most efficient way to get your films completed before the deadline runs off. So the first thing I'm going to do, I don't always do this, but I want to talk about the theme first, because I think it's interesting the way it's handled in this particular game. You see, or at least I'll speak for myself, when I see a Disney-themed game, I'm expecting to be playing as one of the Disney characters. And to be honest, I'm okay with that, but it's not as compelling to me as the way it's handled in this particular theme. I really like the idea of playing as an animator. I think what this does is it gives the game a wider audience. I really do believe that, because children and young adults are still going to potentially be excited about just being immersed with the Disney characters, and so they may interact it more on that end. But myself, I really like the art and the kind of the skill of animation. It's something I've been fascinated with, and I always appreciate and admire people who are talented illustrators and have created these incredible animated films over the years. So I really appreciate that you're playing in a Disney world, but in a different way, a little bit more grounded, where you are playing as the animators. So I really like that a lot. Let's talk about the art and components. Art is the art of Disney. And so it's going to depend upon whether you like the classic Disney animation style or not. I think it's beautiful, so I really like the art. The components for this game are overall really, really good. The value for the retail price of this is immense in my opinion. Every film has its own screen-printed wooden token or tokens. The clear animation cells are a really nice touch thematically and on a component level. It's so satisfying to lay that animation cell on top of those cardboard background components. Really nice. The tokens, the action tokens, are very thick. Your player board is double layered. Both parts of your main player board is double layered. The other one is a thick cardboard. The quality of the cards are fine. They're not necessarily the best, but they are not poor quality. They're average, I would say. I don't feel the need to sleeve them, for example. The cardboard tokens are just what you would expect for a modern hobby board game. And this one is really going more probably for a hybrid between the mass market and the hobby market. So overall, the quality is very good. I have one very specific complaint with the components in this game, and it is bothersome. And I don't know exactly how they could have got around it, but basically when you are getting the game for the first time, okay, the player boards, these dual layer player boards, come with the polyomino or puzzle pieces in there, and you pull them out to get the, separate pieces. When you put them back in here, the fit is pretty darn tight, right? You really have to kind of struggle a lot of times to get those pieces in there. Especially if the boards warp at all, which many of them are going to because of humidity or whatever the case may be. So that's the one real complaint I have about components, is that it can be very, very difficult, and especially if you're playing with younger folk who maybe aren't as delicate in placing their game components, I could see those getting torn up sooner than you would like. So I do feel like it's important to mention that. Otherwise, very good on the component end. The gameplay, I feel like this is in some ways, a very standard cooperative game where you have a lot of those things that you would expect. Player interaction as far as discussing. This one is really good in the use of those tokens. That is an additional way that you can cooperate with other players. The way the calamity cards come up, and so people are working together to kind of complete those calamity cards. So it does those things very well. The kind of the hook is that I don't think I've seen the action selection, kind of that river action selection in a cooperative game before. I have seen it in other games. I mean, Arc Nova is a particular example where you have an action and then you slide and move down, and that was actually maybe inspired from other games. There's a particular one that's escaping my memory right now, but I don't know. I like that action selection. That's neat. That's nice. But I don't think I've seen it in a cooperative game before, so I appreciate that. I think that there is a nice scalability with the difficulty. I do think that the game is challenging. It's not impossible by any means, but you can scale the difficulty by changing the amount of calamity cards, things along those lines. So I do appreciate that, especially since you're going to probably have a wide audience playing this game. You can make it more challenging very easily, and you can scale back the difficulty a bit as well. So overall, I will say that Prospero Hall, when they kind of started a few years back in the industry, made a huge splash. Some very, very popular games, and they were kind of making a niche for themselves in making more mass market style games that had the quality and the mechanics that you expect in modern hobby games. And so that was a big deal. And they did a great job with a lot of their early games. And then I really have to admit, recently I have been less impressed with some of the games coming from that design studio. That's just my opinion. A lot of the games had not been up to par with their earlier slate of games. And so I came into this game with an open mind, but I can't discount the fact that I had had some poor experiences with recent designs from them. This game, I think, is heading back in the right direction, okay? I was very, very happy with the overall package. The production, very good with that one exception that I mentioned. The game flow is at a nice difficulty level where I don't think young children necessarily is the market for this. I mean, I suppose you can do some coaching with them, but I do think this has a wide appeal and a wide amount of players that will be interested in it. It is a solid design. It's one that I'm going to be giving a 7.5 out of 10, a solid seal of approval. I think a couple of things hold it back from getting into a higher level. Probably the biggest issue I have gameplay-wise that keeps it from going a little bit higher than that 7.5 is that I have found that towards the end of the game, there have been times where it's a little bit anticlimactic, where really what you're kind of doing is digging through this animation deck to try to find a particular card to be able to place your villain. And that's a little bit less than satisfying when you've been kind of going through this process and building things up, and you finally got to the point where you can place your villain and complete your film, and then you have to do some card farming. So it hasn't happened every game, but it's happened enough that I do think that there can be a bit of an uneven arc there where the ending is a little bit anticlimactic. So overall, very solid, easy recommend, but a couple little things for you to think about. There you go. That is Disney Animated. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from the Dice Tower Midwest Annex.